Walking through the Recoleta neighborhood of Buenos Aires, you're surrounded by an imported elegance. The streets are lined with ornate, classical architecture that earned this area the title of the Paris of South America. That obsession with European grandeur is highly concentrated at the Recoleta Cemetery, a sprawling necropolis where the elite built towering monuments to enshrine their legacy. But tucked right next to this aristocratic enclave sits a structural anomaly. The Museo Nacional de Bellas Artes is Argentina's premier fine arts institution, housing works from Goya to Van Gogh. Yet this temple of fine art wasn't originally designed for paintings. In the 1870s, this building was the Casa de Bombas, a gritty, utilitarian water pumping station. Inside these walls, massive steam engines roared, driving huge iron pumps that pulled raw water from the river into the expanding city grid. Decades later, city planners took that defunct, soot-stained industrial shell and repurposed it. By pouring cultural treasures into a former utility plant, Argentina engineered a physical blueprint for a refined national identity. In 1932, the architect Alejandro Bustillo inherited the daunting task of renovating the Casa de Bombas. He had to figure out how to take cavernous, echoing industrial spaces and make them safe, welcoming environments for fragile canvas and sculpture. His solution relied on a philosophy he called silent architecture. Instead of applying the heavy, decorative flourishes popular in Buenos Aires at the time, Bustillo mandated that the interior be completely stripped of ornamentation, so the walls would never compete with the art. He tore out the old industrial chimneys and dismantled the enormous water filtration tanks, constructing wide, diaphanous gallery rooms. By removing distractions, the walls recede, guiding foot traffic seamlessly from one room to the next. Alejandro Bustillo designed a perfectly neutral container. With that blank physical map secured, the museum could organize the story of Argentina's cultural evolution, deliberately structured floor by floor. The physical layout of the museum begins with its curatorial anchor. The ground floor is devoted entirely to European antiquity and classical masters. When the museum's first director, Eduardo Schiaffino, founded the institution, he set out to import a comprehensive timeline of Western art. His goal was to provide a direct educational tool for the South American public. During Argentina's Belle Epoque, wealthy families and the state acquired major prestige pieces. They secured the tactile brilliance of Goya, bronze casts from Rodin, and works defined by the thick, deliberate brushstrokes of Monet and Van Gogh. Securing these specific Impressionist and post-impressionist canvases was a highly calculated move. By placing those names on the walls, Buenos Aires signaled to the global art market that it possessed the abundant wealth and refined taste to stand as an equal to London and Paris. The ground floor serves as proof that the young nation had absorbed the classical European narrative, establishing a rigorous baseline of cultural legitimacy. As you walk up the grand main staircase to the first floor, the European academic tradition abruptly stops. The tone in these upper galleries drops you straight into 20th century Argentine modernism. Local painters like Antonio Berni and Xul Solar actively rejected strict European imitation. They swapped out pastoral French landscapes for gritty depictions of social realism, mystical linguistic puzzles, and avant-garde kinetic sculptures. The spatial divide forces a thematic contrast. Downstairs, the collection looks outward across the Atlantic. Upstairs, it turns its gaze firmly inward to the complexities and harsh realities of South America. The physical ascent through the building traces a specific historical timeline. It marks the exact point when Argentine artists stopped collecting the history of the old world and started writing their own. If you climb to the very top floor, you encounter the final layer of the museum's chronological map, an extensive collection of ancient pre-Columbian Andean artifacts. Positioning the region's oldest indigenous art at the very apex of the museum closes the transatlantic dialogue. It grounds the modern, experimental expressions on the floor below in a deep, localized past. Sustaining this vast chronological ecosystem requires a massive civic effort. Today, the philanthropy of the Asociación Amigos del Bellas Artes finances new acquisitions and structural maintenance, ensuring that the entire collection remains free and open to the public. Over a century ago, the Casa de Bombas kept the city alive by distributing clean water. The steam engines and iron pipes are long gone, but the heavy structural heart of the building is still performing a vital civic duty. By wrapping a fine arts institution inside an industrial shell, the Bellas Artes takes the raw history of an entire continent and pumps and circulates it as the cultural lifeblood of the Argentine nation.